So now that we know kind of the basics of nCloth and how to kind of change the settings a little bit, we're going to look at our actual project. And in our project, we're actually going to use nCloth in two different areas. The first thing is, or the second thing, we're going to look at the first one, is his little loincloth bits. We're going to use nCloth to make these flow and be nice and dynamic. But we're also going to use nCloth to kind of fake a belly jiggle for him. We're going to give him a fake muscle. Now Maya does have Maya muscle, but that's a whole beast unto itself. We're going to use nCloth to fake a muscle. So what I want to do is I want to create a sphere. And I will call you Bob. No, just kidding. Get in my belly. I'm just going to make a sphere down here in his belly. And I'll freeze it. Whoops. Freeze transforms. There we go. So now I have my sphere, and I will call you Belly Jiggle. And now I want this sphere to eventually affect the skin. But the first thing I need to do is make this sphere follow the geometry. So I'm going to select one of these joints down here. I just usually select the bottom back joint. And then select the belly jiggle, and I'm going to bind this. Skin, bind skin. Just make sure that you're still on selected joints because you only want that bound to that one joint. And then I'm going to bind it. That's going to make that sphere follow the rig. Now that it's going to follow the rig, I'm also then going to turn it into nCloth. You are nCloth. Yay! So now if I hit play, that sphere is just going to fall. But it's not actually affecting the skin yet. So what I want to do is I want to add this in as an influence. So I'm going to grab the body first. Selection order is important. And then I'm going to select my belly jiggle. And I'm going to go to Skin, Edit Influence, Add Influence, Option Box. You want to make sure Use Geometry is checked because this is geometry. But I'm also going to make sure that the Lock Weights is checked because I want this added with no influence. That's going to make sure I don't mess up any weights I've already painted. And then I'm going to click Add. So now if I click on the body and I go to my paint weight tool, you're going to see up here at the top I have belly jiggle now. Now it's still locked, so you want to make sure you unlock it first. And then I'm going to add in where I want his belly to jiggle. So I'm just going to paint in a nice big chunk here. And then I'm going to go over to smooth, and I'm just going to flood it a couple times. That'll just smooth out that whole area. So now that sphere is actually affecting the body. But when I hit play, nothing happens. Wah, 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 wah. Stop. So it's affecting the skin, but it's not affecting the skin. Why is that? Well, this is the first time we've used something that isn't a joint. It's a piece of geometry. So what we need to do is we need to go into the skin cluster and tell it that it's now allowed to use components in that bind instead of just joints. So I want to turn this on. Now it says, hey, I can use components in my bind. Yay! So now when I hit play, the stomach is going to slide down his body. Blah, 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 blah. Now you can see that that sphere is affecting the gut. That's kind of freaky, doesn't it? So right now, if I go over to my control rig, one other thing to keep in mind. Let's go back to stance. if you're not on frame 1 when you're switching between these things, if I try to switch over to control rig right now, bam! Oh no! My stomach is destroyed. Well, that's because I'm on frame 26. Maya doesn't know how to calculate that jump. Just hit rewind and it'll be all fixed. But I still have a problem. If I hit play, he gets shot in the stomach. Bam! Cannonball. Oh! Well, that's because right now the sphere is nCloth. It's just falling in with gravity. It's not following the rig. Right now it's 100% nCloth. But there is a way to fix it. If I go into the belly jiggle and go into his attributes, we're going to look at one of the dynamic properties we haven't looked at yet. And that's called input mesh attract. And this is how it's being attracted to this guy down here, this belly jiggle base that's made whenever you do something as an influence. So the belly jiggle is the nCloth. The belly jiggle base is the bound object. This is how you mix between them. At 0, it's 100% nCloth. At 1, it's 100% bound. So if I click it now and hit play, it's just a bound object following the skeleton. But if I start playing with this setting, and I'm going to make it really jiggly just for effect. A bligga 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 bligga. A bligga 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 bligga. Oh, I shouldn't eaten that Taco Bell. Oh, I shouldn't eaten that Taco Bell. You see how you can start to get that jiggle effect. Start giving this guy life. Because remember, you're to the point now in the program where you're starting to do those subtle differences. And when we move around, especially if you have that big gut, you get a little bit of a settle. So obviously I went way overboard at 0.372. All you want is just that little bit of subtle jiggle. That's what's going to change your character from being alive to just being a polygon object. You may need to go in and smooth the weights a little bit more. See, I'm getting a couple little points in there. Probably use my smooth skin tool. But you see how you start to just get that little bit of a subtle settling. Dunga dunga. It's all, you want it to be almost imperceptible, but your mind picks it up and says, hey, that's how the body works. See, I just get that little bit of a jiggle there at the end. That's what's going to sell your character, make him alive. Cool? So that's the belly jiggle. Now I'm just going to open up a new scene just to keep everything nice and easy. Now let's look at the loiny bits. So the loin bits, we're going to do the same process basically. Now you can use an end constraint and make it follow something, but there's a little bit easier way to do it. And it's basically the same thing we did for the belly jiggle. Now the belt, just bind the belt to the hips. Don't try changing the belt into nCloth. So I'm just going to skin, bind skin. But for the loin bits, we're going to do basically the same process we did for the belly jiggle. Now, it does have a poly smooth on it. I would kick the divisions up one to give yourself more verts to work with. It'll make it a little bit smoother. So what I'm going to do is I'm also going to rotate this up a little bit. Reason I'm doing that is we're going to make a passive collider out of his legs. And you don't want those verts on the inside and the outside at that first frame. So I always usually rotate it up a little bit. So now we've added the divisions. We've made it a little bit smoother. Rotated it up a little bit. Now we're going to do the same process we did for the belly jiggle. I'm going to select the hip root, shift select the loincloth, skin, bind skin. You are bound. Yay! Now I'm going to turn this into nCloth. nCloth, create nCloth, you are nCloth. Yay! Remember, you must make sound effects. So now if I go to the control rig, it's following. But right now it's just nCloth, so it's just going to fall down. Do 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 do. Stop. Rewind. And go back to stance. So right now it's acting just as nCloth. Now if I go into my input mesh attract, that's affecting the whole object. I want to kind of cheat again and mix up where it's going to be acting like nCloth and where it's going to be acting like a bound mesh. Now, one thing to keep in mind, if you want to use a preset, cool, rock on, go for it, they're here. I recommend using them. I'll even tell you, burlap works pretty well for this guy. But if you want to use a preset, you have to do it before this next step. Once you do the next step, you can't use a preset because it resets things for this. So once I've chosen the preset I want to use, I'm going to put this input mesh attract all the way up to 1. That's going to make it just following the bind. But then I'm going to go into nCloth, paint vertex properties, and down here we have input attract. You can actually paint that input attract if I would have had it selected. There it goes, paint vertex properties. Sorry about that. So, right now you see it's all white. It's all following the mesh exactly, or the bind. But what we can do is we can paint a value of 0. Anywhere it's 0, it's going to act like nCloth. Anywhere it's 1, it's going to act like a bind. So we can actually go in here and paint, and I'm going to isolate this. There we go. And it's double-sided, so you have to paint both sides. Zoop, zoop. And you basically want to keep the top white. That'll make that follow the bind. Make the bottom black, and that'll make this act like nCloth. Just making sure I get it all. So now when I switch over to my control rig and hit play, you'll see that the top is following the hips and the bottom is acting like nCloth that's going up into his body. So now we're getting the best of both worlds. But as you can see, it's acting kind of weird because it's going up into his body. So we need some kind of passive collider to keep this working correctly. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab my dude. I'm going to go back to stance. And I'm going to duplicate him. Control D. And then I'm going to isolate my duplication. And then I'm going to basically chop them up a little bit. I don't want to make the whole body into a passive collider. That'd be a lot to calculate. So I'm basically just going to give him a pair of shorts. Something like that. And then I'm going to bind these shorts. So I'm going to go to select by name, just like we did at the beginning of the month. Star underscore bind. Select all my bind joints. Click on my new cave troll, my shorts. And just do a skin, bind skin. Now I don't want to have to paint weights on that whole thing again, do I? That'd be a pain in the keister. But luckily, they give us an option. If I grab my main cave troll, then shift click on my shorts, and go to skin, copy skin weights. Copy skin weights. That'll copy the weights from this one to that one. That'll make it follow exactly. So I don't have to paint weights again. Yay! So now I have this part, and I'm going to go ahead and name this nCloth Collider. Now I can go ahead and make this into a passive collider. So I'm going here, go nCloth, create passive collider, and I can even hide it. Doesn't need to be visible to be a collider. So now when I go to my control rig, that cloth is now going to collide with his thighs. Ha ha ha. And now it's really just a matter of playing with the settings to get it to look the way you want. Stop. So I'll give you a couple hints to make it look a lot better. The first one is I like to have this settle a little bit, because right now it's kind of sticking out weird. You can actually go negative in your time frame. So I'm going to go before the animation even starts. And I'm going to go ahead and play with the settings. Now one setting I'll tell you will really help, because this guy is so big and the scene is so big, is go into your nucleus and play around with the gravity. So I'm going to give it a lot more gravity just to have it settle a lot faster. Let's see what that does. Nothing. Because right now the nucleus is set to start at frame 1. So I need to go down to the time attributes and say its start frame is -100. That way the simulation will start early too. And you'll see how it's starting to fall. But that's pretty slow. I want to speed it up, so I'm going to crank that gravity up. Zounk. That's still too slow for me. I'm an impatient person. 1,000! There we go. See how it's just letting that cloth kind of settle into a neutral pose? And then what I can do is once it's settled, stop, I can grab that cloth and under field solvers, I can say set its initial state from where it's at right now. So now that's going to be its start position. Whenever I hit rewind, it's going to stay at that position. So now I can go back and just reset everything. Go back to frame 1. Go into my solver. Set this back to frame 1. And now I have a lot more neutral pose. And I would actually keep that gravity up for the animation. That's going to help keep this from going all the way up his crotch. See, I'd probably even set the gravity higher. Remember, it doesn't matter what's real in the real world. It only matters how it looks on the screen. So you see how now I'm getting a lot better settling action with that end cloth. It's still being end cloth, and it may go through a little bit, but remember, it's all from the play blast. How does it look from your camera angle? And you may want to go in and change some of the settings inside the cloth itself as well. But that's a good start on how to make that end cloth work. There we go. How to make that end cloth actually nice and work for the loincloth. Cool, cool. Next, we're going to look at end hair.